Has the New Orleans Saints offense officially turned a corner, or was it all just a fluke against the Indianapolis Colts? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on this In Case You Missed It episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and a big shout out to all you everydayers out there. Don't forget, you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going, take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, and much more, you can become a Locked On Saints insider today by heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. Join a community I would love for you to be a part of. With you as always, I am your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, Saints News Network, Tuesdays in the Locked On NFL podcast, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Head over to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL today and enter the promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to get a first deposit match up to $100. It's our In Case You Missed It episode that we do here just about every Saturday, getting you caught up with the top 5 biggest takes from the week on the show to help get you ready for Sunday or Monday's action. So today we're going to be taking a look at big weeks loading potentially for Chris Olave and Rasheed Shaheed. We're going to talk about Derek Carr's performance this past weekend and why it was right for the New Orleans Saints to stand pat at the trade deadline. But I want to start off here with the fact that the New Orleans Saints are showing us so far that their offense in particular has turned a corner. But we're still asking the question, can they be consistent? And can it be sustainable the way that they won against the Indianapolis Colts last week? So have they turned a corner, or is it a fluke? So far, all the signs are pointing to the Saints having turned a corner. I'm going to explain why here in a second, but the reason why we're not super sure of it yet is because we want to see the repeatable effect, right? We want to see the repeatable sort of, process, the results, all of those things. That's what I was looking for, repeatable results. So let's take a look at why I think the New Orleans Saints are on track for proving that they have turned the corner. Now, none of this matters if they don't win this weekend, right? Like if they drop this game to the Chicago Bears, then all of a sudden it's all back downhill. Everybody's going to be critical of the team, and rightfully so, and all these other things. But if they're able to show, hey, this is a repeatable process, then it's something. Here's what I think about this team is repeatable, particularly over on the offensive side, after their win against the Indianapolis Colts. And we have to start with, why is it the offense was cooking in the first place, right? Like what happened, why they cooked. So the thing that I love and that I've talked about a bunch, and this goes back to our Monday episode, Thursday's live episode, can the Saints repeat their offensive success, that episode, that the Saints put their playmakers in position to make plays. You heard me talk about that throughout the week, potentially. If you didn't, here it is. The Saints utilized Chris Olave in zone, up against zone coverage, letting him find those pockets in zone coverage and everything. He's very good at that. Utilized Rasheed Shaheed as a deep threat, but also decoyed him a bunch and then had him, running some of those in-breaking routes. Michael Thomas in-breaking routes, targeting him in the short areas toward the sideline, all that, but not necessarily streaking down the sideline. The one time that they did target Michael Thomas down that left sideline was the first throw of the game, back shoulder throw though. So right back into the pocket of what it is that Michael Thomas does. Taysom Hill utilized in the red zone and in short yardage situations. Alvin Kamara utilized in the red zone. Option route was back. All of those pieces. So just some examples of how the Saints utilize their playmakers and their best players in the ways that best complement what it is that they do well in their game, right? You want to do something that makes your team great. Do the things that make the individual players great. And I think that's where you saw them using the skill position players, and all of that complemented Derek Carr, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but all that complemented Derek Carr and put Derek Carr in position to do the things that make him great as well, which is that they kept him clean, only 4 pressures allowed in this game. They continued to distribute the ball all over the field, a variety of different players, multiple players contributing to touchdowns, all those things. That elevated Derek Carr, that allowed Derek Carr to elevate other players, that allowed other players, skill position players, to elevate themselves. That's what you want to see from this offense. I also love some of the play designs that we saw. I rewatched over and over again, and Locked On Saints insiders are going to get a film breakdown later on today around some of the best play designs in this game. And one of them was the big 31-yard pass to Michael Thomas in the middle of the field. Okay, so that's one big thing, right? Targeting him in the middle of the field. What an idea. But the play design coming out of that trips bunch formation on the right side, where you kind of see these guys line up kind of like a triangle, was so good. It just got me to cussing. Like I saw it and I loved it so much, because you saw Lynn Bowden at the bottom of that triangle come in, kind of run a little bit of a pivot route, breaking out towards the sideline. You saw the double post, kind of like an over end post, really, to where Jaylon Johnson was underneath while Michael Thomas went in over the top. And because Lynn Bowden broke toward the outside, pulled the middle of the field defender out with him, because Jaylon Johnson crossed the middle of the field before Michael Thomas broke on his route, pulled the safety out of the middle of the field, Michael Thomas runs directly into the middle of the field, boom, green grass, 31-yard completion. That's the kind of stuff that you're used to seeing from the New Orleans Saints. It's not just about the individual effort of the player. It's the way that the individual effort of the player is supported by the scheme, supported by the route concept. So I loved seeing that from New Orleans. Now, the big thing is that when you see that this team has turned its corner and you're starting to look at that evidence, the next thing is, can they prove it, right? Can they prove that they have officially turned that corner and that they are in a situation to where you're going to see this offense get better and better and better? Because there were some things in that game to where if you clean them up, penalties, drop passes, things like that, the team performs even better. So you have even a little bit more of space between where they are and the ceiling. So they can get better, which means that they can get better in some areas, even if they fall off on a couple of different areas, and still end up producing around the same, right? There's a net gain, net average towards all that. So I love where the New Orleans Saints were against Indianapolis, but now they have to show up and do it again against Chicago, show up and do it again against Minnesota, show up and do it again after the bye week against the Atlanta Falcons. That's going to prove the consistency. And when it comes to this game against the Chicago Bears, where there's no Tremaine Edmonds in the middle of the field, where there's no Jaquan Brisker, the safety for Chicago deep, where Jaylon Johnson and the Chicago Bears are dealing with their, spat about, he asked to be traded. They didn't trade him. The Bears publicly negotiating, basically saying like, oh, we didn't even give him his final offer, and he's asking for trades and all that stuff. So there's turmoil there. They're missing pieces on that defensive side of the football. And then Terrell Smith, who they're also missing, has like the third or fourth most snaps amongst all the defensive backs or corners on this team. There's a real opportunity here for the New Orleans Saints offense to show that they can continue to cook, and they didn't just cook for a week and then now they're ordering out for the next couple of weeks. So can't let that happen. That's where the New Orleans Saints have to be. But you have seen elements of what should be sustainable for this team. Now they just need to go out and confirm that they are indeed sustainable, and they can go out there and string some wins together so they don't fall into the same like roller coaster of a trap that they were in last year. Coming up next, let's take a look at why it was the right choice for the New Orleans Saints to stand pat at the trade deadline, and we're going to take a deeper look at Derek Carr's best game as a New Orleans Saint as well. Got that coming up for you as we continue on with this In Case You Missed It episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. I put in an all Alvin Kamara Prize Pick submission, 6 different projections, and I chose more or less, all for Alvin Kamara in this game against the Chicago Bears. That's one of the reasons why I love Prize Picks. It's not only you versus the house without any of the less than transparent situations where you're going up against a bunch of mystery lineups and spreadsheet wizards and all that kind of stuff. It's also fun too. So it was pretty cool to be able to do that. So you want to check out Prize Picks as well. I highly recommend it. You just choose 2 to 6 different entries, different projections, choose whether or not the players that are attached to that projection are going to come out at more or less than that projection. You get those right, you can get up to 25 times your deposit in. So let me help you out real quick. I want you to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL or into the promo code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase, and it's going to get you a first deposit match up to $100. It's a first deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. It's our In Case You Missed It episode, so we're just getting you caught up with the 5 biggest takes throughout the week heading into tomorrow's matchup against the Chicago Bears. I'll be there in attendance. And don't forget the live postcast win or lose after the game as well, after we're all done with media availability, all that good stuff, I'll be out there on the Superdome field bringing you everything you need to know about the game. And look, leading into this game was the trade deadline, and the New Orleans Saints did not make a move. And you saw a couple of different moves across the NFL. You're seeing more and more moves at the trade deadline. I think there were 11 last year. I think we got about 6 or 7 or so this year. Even though still the biggest trade of the trade deadline was the NBA, was James Harden going to the Clippers. We have shows that cover the NBA here on Locked On, by the way. If you're a big fan, start with Locked On NBA. Awesome stuff. But the Saints did not make a move, even though they weren't outside of conversations, plural. The big one that made a lot of ripple across was, of course, the potential move, or at least the conversation that reportedly took place between the New Orleans Saints and the Las Vegas Raiders for Hunter Renfrow that didn't end up happening. Now, there's a bunch of logistics reasons that probably lead to that. There were all of the staff changes with the Raiders as well. That could have been a thing. But overall, it wasn't a move that the New Orleans Saints needed to make. Probably would have been a move that would have been nice for Derek Carr to have another another receiver that he's already got a lot of communication with and a lot of chemistry with and all those other things. Would have been nice from that perspective, but not a necessity, right? So the New Orleans Saints did not make a move. And honestly, there's a couple of different reasons why. They lacked a lot of movable assets. While they were having those conversations with the Raiders, I'm sure that those conversations were centering around day 3 picks, rounds 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, for the Saints, rounds 5, 6, and 7, right? They don't have a 4th round pick. And I think that's one of the reasons why you also saw them not make a move. Oftentimes when it comes to the bigger moves in the trade deadline, you see players get moved, not for 1st round picks, not often for 2nd round picks, but you see a lot of day 2, round 3, early day 3, round 4 type selections that get moved. And that was made evident in this trade deadline as well, with the exception of the Chicago Bears, who just habitually send 2nd round picks for players. They did it last year for Chase Claypool. They did it this year for Montez Sweat. And the Saints weren't, if the Saints were interested in Montez Sweat, they weren't going to be able to compete with the Bears offer, of which projected to be the 35th overall selection in this year's draft. The Saints have a 2nd round pick, but it's a Denver Broncos 2nd round pick, which is too good to outbid the San Francisco 49ers for a Chase Young that wouldn't have fit their system anyway, and not good enough to compete with the Chicago Bears for Montez Sweat, who would have fit the system a little bit better. So I think that that's probably why you didn't see them make moves. And then all the other moves would have been low-level moves where you weren't going to get a lot of benefit anyway. They could have maybe made a move for Ezra Cleveland if they wanted to, but that's not the spot where they need the most help. Where they need the most help is at tackle, right? So moving for a guard just wouldn't have made sense for them. And moving for a guard that has started 40 or 42 games and all these other things. Like, yeah, you can get that NFL experience, but he wasn't going to start over Cesar Ruiz over on the right side. And the Saints feel pretty good about what they have at left guard now between Andrew Sweet's a part of that conversation, but between James Hurst and Max Garcia in particular, not really a place to upgrade for them. And so, or Ezra Cleveland would not have been an upgrade. And then no other offensive lineman, as you can see, moved. So nothing was really going to happen there. So they lacked the movable assets. They probably weren't desirable players at the positions where they actually would have ended up making a move on the offensive line. The talks with Hunter Renfrow about Hunter Renfrow just kind of went stale. And then the other thing too is that the Saints didn't look to move any players for this one. Like Mickey Loomis talked about it. They didn't really have any interest in trading players away to gather assets. That wasn't a part of what it is that they wanted to do over the course of this trade deadline. I'm sure you saw the rumors around the idea that, the Saints and the Minnesota Vikings were having conversations about Jameis Winston. Bunk, big time bunk. And so like that just wasn't a part of what it is that they were looking to do in at this trade deadline. So I don't blame them, right? Don't make a move just for the sake of making a move. Oh, it's a trade deadline, we should do something. No, right? Like it's kind of like having a teacher in college or in high school or something like that who like is only giving you feedback because they feel like it's their job to give you feedback. They don't actually have constructive feedback for you. It's just like I'm a teacher, so I have to say something, I guess. That's not constructive. That doesn't help anybody. And for the Saints, like, don't make a move just because it's the trade deadline and good teams make moves at the trade deadline. There's no evidence to that. The Chicago Bears made moves at the trade deadline. So, yeah, let's take a look. Derek Carr undoubtedly played his best game as a New Orleans Saint in their win against the Indianapolis Colts. He absolutely did. This goes back to our Wednesday episode, which effectively has that same title. By the way, the take on the Saints not making a move at the trade deadline. That was back from Wednesday's episode. This one actually is from Tuesday's episode. Sorry. So Derek Carr played his best game as a New Orleans Saint. And I know that the Saints shut out the New England Patriots 34-0 a couple weeks ago. But even in that game, I didn't feel as good about the New Orleans Saints offense as a whole, let alone Derek Carr. But I didn't feel as good about Derek Carr coming out of that game as I did about them coming out of this game against the Indianapolis Colts. And the main reason why is because one of the reasons why the Saints invested in Derek Carr is because they felt like Derek Carr could be one of those guys, one of those quarterbacks that can go down the field to respond, right? And I think that they did a good job of that, the New Orleans Saints. I like the fact that they faced some adversity in this game. That Gardner Minshew and the Indianapolis Colts offense, they kept things interesting. Now, the Saints dropped a couple of interceptions and things like that would have changed the course of this game entirely. And then a couple of pass interference penalties and all those things help too, don't get me wrong. But Gardner Minshew, firing, doesn't get sacked, rolls out to the right side, fires a touchdown to a tight end in the back of the end zone. Jordan Howden kind of pulls off, don't want to get flagged for the pass interference penalty. Lonnie Johnson Jr.'s diving attempt was so close, but, look, it's a game of inches, right? And then Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints offense, they come back, they have to respond, they do. And I think that was something that I really saw different about this team against Indianapolis that they hadn't shown so far this year. They could not respond against the Green Bay Packers. They could not buy an inch against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Even against the Tennessee Titans to open the season wasn't really about responding. That was about the defense locking everything down. But in this game, and then against New England, there was nothing to respond to, right? Like there was no adversity in that game. Like they were awful, the New England Patriots. And so in this game where you kind of have to do the tit for tat, the back and forth a little bit, I think that ended up benefiting the outlook post that game, right? Post win, because of how just good they had to be coming out of this one. So I really did appreciate that part of the game. I also think that Derek just did a good job of distributing the ball and running the offense. I think that's the thing. Like I love that they culled some of that play selection in certain situations and stuff like that, so that you just have a more refined selection of plays than sort of this wide swath of plays. They kind of narrowed things down to the plays that they like the best in given situations, which feels obvious. But when you have a playbook like the New Orleans Saints, which is like thick with many, many, many C's, it can be a little overwhelming. And so I think that having sort of that cold playbook, that helped Derek Carr. Derek Carr being able to lead the offense with that cold playbook, that helped the rest of the offense. Derek Carr being the veteran presence that he is, that helped to kind of lead them to stay composed in those moments where they did need to go down and respond. It's one of the reasons why they wanted him. And so it was great. It was great to see that. Now, just like for the rest of the offense, can Derek Carr follow that up with another good performance against the Chicago Bears? It's going to be a lot of fun to see. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at Chris Olave and Rasheed Shaheed. When it comes to Chris Olave, I'm expecting a bounce back game this weekend. When it comes to Rasheed Shaheed, you got to respect his gangster. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at DoorDash. I've been telling you how much I use DoorDash all the time. 1,000 Figs, got some delivered just the other day. Nice little falafel sandwich. I was talking about the New Orleans Saints earlier today and how they were cooking against the Indianapolis Colts, and that they might need to show that they could keep cooking. For you ain't got to worry about keep cooking. Go ahead and use some DoorDash, get some delivery, have it come over. You got lots of local favorites, whether you're here in New Orleans, visiting New Orleans, or whether you're somewhere else and just cheering for New Orleans. Lots of fantastic local spots for you to be able to do, like I get from 1,000 Figs and Trilly cheesesteaks and Weedats and stuff like that. So I want you to really go and check out DoorDash. I'm going to help you out. If you've never used DoorDash before, now's the time. 50% off, up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order on the DoorDash app. Just download the DoorDash app, enter the code LOCKED23, LOCKED 23, use the numbers, subject to change, terms apply. That's 50% off, up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order at DoorDash. When you download the DoorDash app, enter that promo code LOCKED23, subject to change, terms apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. I feel like I had a little voice crack right there. Hey, guess what? Chris Olave's bounce back game is on the way this weekend. That's just how I feel. I feel it. I feels it. Therefore, I believes it. And hopefully we sees it. Like that's what I'm hoping for this weekend. I do believe that this is going to be Chris Olave's bounce back game. I appreciate all you everydayers for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day and for being here with us. Look, The reason why I think that this is going to be a bounce back game for Chris Olave is that, first of all, his awareness of his struggles presents for me the maturity that people are concerned he lacks. His ability to sit in front of New Orleans media and say, you know what? I've had some shortcomings here recently. I've faced some scrutiny here recently. It's gotten to me here recently. I need that bounce back game, and I'll be right back in it. That level of awareness, of self-awareness, is something that the maturity that people say that he might lack, or that people are concerned that he might lack, that very maturity allows him to have that self-awareness. When you see players that lack maturity, they're not coming out there and saying, yeah, it's on me. They're not coming out there and saying, yes, I've been struggling. They're not coming out there and saying, yeah, things have been getting to me, but I'm going to be all right, though. They're saying, hey, what you mean? I'm doing great. You know what I mean? Like that would be the kind of response that you would usually see from somebody that doesn't necessarily have that level of maturity, that level of self-awareness. So everything that it is that people are concerned Chris Olave lacks, he is displaying as a human being. Now he's got to go out there and display what it is that he can do on the field. There's not much of a difference between where Chris Olave is through 8 games right now versus where he was through the first 8 games of his rookie season. Everything, we're just waiting to see the explosion, right? And I understand that being where he was his rookie season can be a bit of a disappointment for people who were expecting better. We were expecting a big time kind of moonshot from Chris Olave, but there's still loads of time for that to happen. 9 more games, and I think we'll start to see it here against the Chicago Bears. Why? Schematically, the Chicago Bears corners are in zone coverage about 70% of their game, somewhere between 65 to 70% of their game so far this season. Usually, those corners are only playing man coverage about 20 to 25% of their game. That opens up Chris Olave's opportunity to do what it is that he does really, really well. Now, he plays man coverage well, comes off of press man coverage really well, all of those things. But what he does against zone coverage really well is that he finds those pockets in the zone. He's a very smart player. He's a highly intelligent player from that perspective. And so that will give him the opportunity to rack up some of those big yardage numbers over the course of this game between the 20s. Then when it gets into the red zone and the Bears switch to man coverage, then he gets an opportunity to go out there and beat man coverage. Now, look, he might not have many opportunities because if the Saints want to keep being successful in the red zone, they may just continue to run in the red zone. But I still think in this game, Chris Olave has his first multi-touchdown game and goes over the century mark. So he goes for triple digits in terms of receiving yards, gets 2 touchdowns in this game. He might not get 2 touchdowns in the game. That's a little bit of my bold prediction, but still, that's where I'm going. Like, I really think that this is a bounce back game for Chris Olave, and I'm very, very, very excited to see it. I'm very, very excited for him to show it, and then for him to be able to revel in it. Because if he has the wherewithal to be aware of his struggles, then he deserves the opportunity to be aware of his success as well. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited for you to see it, and I'm excited for him to be able to bask in it afterwards because he would deserve to do that. Because everything that this young man has been through here recently, the scrutiny that he has faced, not only on the field, but off the field, when you have and you weather all of that and you go out there and you find success, treat yourself. Celebrate it, celebrate it, celebrate it. Opposite, not necessarily opposite, but in addition to Chris Olave, this could be another big game for Rasheed Shaheed in an all-around aspect, not necessarily just as a receiver. Rasheed Shaheed, you have to respect his gangsta. So this is going back to Monday's episode about where I talked about the Jameis Winston trade rumors, but then also spoke a little bit about what the Saints did really well schematically. And a part of what they did really, really well schematically is that they put Rasheed Shaheed in his opportunity to succeed. And listen, Rasheed Shaheed is a guy that is doing much more than just being a deep downfield threat. Is he making deep downfield plays? Absolutely. 100% he is. He's got 6 40 plus yard? It's either 6 or 4 40 plus yard plays this year. The only person that he trails in that category is Tyreek Hill. Get ready. You're about to hear Tyreek Hill's name a lot in this segment, and deservedly so for Rasheed Shaheed. So he trails in 40-yard plays only behind Tyreek Hill. Since 2022, when he came in the league, he's got 10 of them things, trailing only Tyreek Hill, who's got 14 of them things, 40-plus yard plays downfield. And right now, Rasheed Shaheed has 988 all-purpose yards, trailing only Tyreek Hill, who's got 1,028. Rasheed Shaheed is merely 12 yards away from already through what will be 9 games, crossing the 1,000-yard mark in terms of all-purpose yardage. Here's how he got there. 479 receiving yards, 33 rushing yards, 265 kick return yards, 211 punt return yards. You have to respect Rasheed Shaheed's gangsta. And he's more than just that deep threat. He's the returner. He's the guy that can go up there and make those contested catches for you. You've seen it over and over and over again. Jump ball situations. When he had that pass that he caught against the Indianapolis Colts, it was originally ruled an interception, reviewed, overturned, caught by Rasheed Shaheed. Like, he just goes out there and does it. Just goes out there and gets it done. Even in the game against the Houston Texans, which was a loss, he went out there and made a ridiculous play going up over the top of a receiver in a 50-50 ball situation. So I'm all about where Rasheed Shaheed is right now. And I think it's going to be another big game for him as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be another 153-yard receiving game. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him cross the 100-yard mark in all-purpose yards in this game as a rusher, as a receiver, and as a returner. And I think that's what we're looking for here. Respect Rasheed Shaheed's gangsta. And I want to give a shout out to my good friend Catherine Terrell as well over at ESPN, who wrote a great sort of a feature on Rasheed Shaheed being more than a deep threat. And this is something we talked about very, very early before the season started. His ability to sell the deep pass gives him the opportunity to be able to run these short intermediate routes, to be able to catch passes in space and create. His ability as a returner adds to his ability as a rusher in the jet sweeps, the reverses, however it is that you want to utilize it, all those things, which I think we'll see one of those. I think we'll see one of those jet sweeps back in the offense this week against Chicago. All of that stuff gives you a really good idea of how it is that Rasheed Shaheed is more than just that deep downfield threat. And it's awesome. It's awesome to watch because this is another gem for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to undrafted free agency. They hit on Deontay Hardy. They hit again on Rasheed Shaheed. And I think they hit even more on Rasheed Shaheed than they did on Deontay Hardy. All right. Next time that you see me will be after the New Orleans Saints win or lose to the Chicago Bears on the floor of the Superdome field. We'll have our live postcast after media availability, all that right down there. So I look forward to seeing you there. Have a fun and safe Saturday. Go Tigers. And I will see y'all on Sunday. Appreciate you, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, and for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Learn how to family zone, learn how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.